My husband said, "I'm not your caregiver." He said it standing in our kitchen, arms crossed, voice flat, like he was setting a boundary at work instead of responding to a medical diagnosis that had just changed my life. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't ask for help again. I simply stopped carrying everything he never noticed I was handling. Weeks later, a letter arrived at the house. My name was already missing from everything that mattered, and he wasn't expecting who would be waiting on the other side of that decision. I'm 39 years old. I'd been married for 12 years, together for more than a decade. And 2 months earlier, on a Thursday afternoon in February, a doctor sat across from me and calmly explained that I had stage 3 kidney disease. Not a death sentence, but not nothing either. Dietary restrictions, medication schedules, dialysis 3 times a week if things didn't improve, possibly a transplant in the future. While the nephrologist spoke, my husband sat beside me scrolling through his phone. I watched his thumb double tap the screen, probably liking a photo, while my entire future was being rewritten out loud. The doctor asked if we had questions. I had dozens. My husband just looked up and said, "When can we leave?" That was the moment I understood something was deeply wrong. On the drive home, I stared out of the window, trying to process what it meant to be sick in a body that had always worked for me. He texted the entire way. When we got home, I sat at the kitchen table with pamphlets about support groups, insurance assistance, dialysis centers. He made himself a snack. "So," he said finally, chewing, "what does this mean?" "It means my kidneys are failing," I said. "It means our life is going to change." He paused, then said the sentence that froze everything in place. "I'm not your caregiver." Just like that. No hesitation, no softness, no concern. I realized in that moment that the illness wasn't what was going to destroy my marriage. It was the clarity. And when I stopped asking him to be something he had no intention of being, everything else started to fall apart exactly the way it was supposed to. I was 26 when I married my husband, and at the time, I believed we were choosing each other with open eyes. We met in graduate school, both pursuing demanding degrees that required discipline, long hours, and a tolerance for delayed gratification. Late-night study sessions turned into shared dinners. Group projects turned into conversations about values, ambition, and the kind of stability we both said we wanted. He was practical, grounded, confident in a way that felt reassuring, especially to someone like me, who tended to overthink. He talked about partnership like it was teamwork, about marriage like it was a long-term investment. I liked that language. It made love feel safe instead of reckless. After graduation, our lives unfolded predictably. He advanced steadily in his career. I did the same. We married after 4 years together, not because of pressure, but because it felt like the logical next step. Our families approved. Friends said we were solid, no drama, no red flags anyone could point to. We bought a house a few years later. Technically, it was in my name. I had purchased it before we were married. But it became our home in every way that mattered. I handled the mortgage, utilities, insurance, property taxes. It wasn't something we discussed much. I was good at it, organized, responsible. He never asked how things were managed, and I never thought to explain. That was the pattern from the beginning. I carried the invisible structure of our life. He enjoyed the comfort of it. For a long time, I didn't mind. I scheduled appointments, balanced accounts, made sure everything ran smoothly so we could focus on living. He contributed financially in small, informal ways, groceries here, a bill there. But the foundation was mine. I told myself this was partnership, different strengths, different roles. Emotionally, our marriage was quiet. Not cold, not cruel, just restrained. He wasn't expressive, but he showed up when it counted, or at least when things were easy. Holidays were pleasant, social events effortless. We hosted dinners, raised our dog together. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. Looking back now, I can see the early signs I ignored. He struggled with inconvenience. Small disruptions irritated him more than they should have. If plans changed unexpectedly, he became withdrawn. When something required sustained effort without immediate reward, his patience thinned. But I explained it away. Work stress, personality differences, normal marriage adjustments. I believe commitment meant endurance, that loving someone meant compensating quietly for what they lacked. I didn't realize that when real hardship arrived, something that couldn't be rescheduled or minimized, those quiet imbalances would become impossible to ignore. By the time my diagnosis came, the marriage I thought was strong had already been standing on uneven ground. I just hadn't needed to test it yet. After the diagnosis, I expected things to feel different. Not easier, not suddenly hopeful, just shared. Like we were standing on the same side of something difficult, even if we didn't know how to navigate it yet. That's what marriage was supposed to be, right? Facing uncertainty together, even when it was uncomfortable. Instead, the distance started almost immediately. At first, it was subtle enough that I questioned myself. He didn't ask follow-up questions after appointments. When I mentioned new medications, he nodded but didn't engage. When I talked about dietary changes, he shrugged and said things like, "You'll figure it out," in a tone that sounded encouraging but felt dismissive. I told myself he just didn't know what to say. But then there were the small moments that stayed with me longer than they should have. The first time I came home exhausted after blood work and imaging, he was on the couch watching TV. I sat beside him and said quietly, "Today was rough." He didn't look away from the screen. "Yeah, that sucks." That was it. No questions, no follow-up, no curiosity about what rough meant. A week later, I asked if he could drive me to an appointment because the medication made me dizzy in the mornings. He sighed, not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. "I have a meeting," he said. "Can't you reschedule?" I didn't push. I adjusted the appointment myself. Then it became a pattern. Every request felt like an inconvenience. Every mention of my health felt like a disruption to his routine. He started spending more time out of the house, longer gym sessions, after-work drinks, errands that took hours. When he was home, his attention was elsewhere, his phone, the TV, anything but me. I noticed that when I stopped bringing things up, the house got quieter, more peaceful, fewer sighs, less tension. So I stopped. I stopped talking about side effects. I stopped mentioning upcoming appointments. I stopped asking for help. Instead, I started managing everything on my own. I set reminders on my phone for medication. I called the insurance company myself and navigated coverage changes. I researched dialysis centers, read forums, joined online support groups anonymously at night while he slept. He never noticed. What hurt most wasn't that he didn't help. It was that he didn't seem to realize I needed it. One evening, as I organized paperwork at the kitchen table, he walked by and said casually, "You're really letting this illness take over your life." I looked up at him, stunned. "It's not taking over my life," I said slowly. "It is my life right now." He shook his head. "You're just focused on it all the time. It's depressing." That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. Because I understood then that this wasn't about fear or confusion on his part. It was about discomfort. My illness didn't fit into the version of life he'd signed up for, the efficient, predictable, low-maintenance one. And instead of adapting, he was pulling away. I didn't confront him, not yet. But I started paying closer attention, not to catch him doing something wrong, but to understand exactly how alone I already was. And the more I observed, the clearer it became. The marriage wasn't breaking because I was sick. It was breaking because when things stopped being easy, he stopped being present. The appointment that changed everything happened on a Thursday afternoon in February. The hospital room was too bright, too clean, the kind of sterile space that makes every word sound heavier than it should. The nephrologist sat across from me with a calm, practiced expression, the kind doctors use when they're about to explain something serious but manageable if you're willing to work for it. Stage 3 kidney disease. Not an emergency, not a death sentence, but not something you could ignore. He explained the plan carefully. Strict dietary changes, medication schedules that couldn't be missed, frequent lab work, dialysis likely within 6 months if my numbers didn't improve, and possibly, eventually, a transplant. As he spoke, I took notes. My mind raced ahead, already reorganizing my life around this new reality. Work schedules, finances, long-term planning. My husband sat next to me, scrolling on his phone. I watched his thumb double-tap the screen, liking something, maybe responding to a message, while the doctor talked about my kidneys failing. It felt surreal, like we were occupying two completely different moments in time. When the doctor finished, he asked, "Do you have any questions?" I had dozens. Before I could speak, my husband looked up and said, "When can we leave?" The doctor blinked, slightly surprised. "I can give you a few more minutes." "No," my husband said, already standing. "We're good." The drive home was silent. I stared out the window, watching familiar streets blur together as I tried to process what this diagnosis meant. He was texting the entire way, phone buzzing softly every few minutes. Each vibration felt louder than the last. When we got home, I sat at the kitchen table with the stack of papers the doctor had given me: diet guidelines, information on support groups, insurance resources. I spread them out carefully, like organizing them might make the situation feel more manageable. My husband went to the pantry, grabbed a bag of chips, and leaned against the counter. "So," he said casually, "what does this actually mean?" "It means my kidneys are failing," I replied. "It means I need to change my diet completely. It means I'll need regular treatments. It means our life is going to look different." He nodded, chewing. "Different how?" "I'll need help," I said, "managing appointments, getting to treatments when I'm weak, dealing with insurance. The medication alone is expensive." He paused, then said it, calmly, clearly, without hesitation. "I'm not your caregiver." The words hung in the air between us. I looked at him, waiting for him to soften it, to explain, to clarify. He didn't. "I'm not asking you to be my caregiver," I said slowly. "I'm asking for support. I'm your wife." "Support is one thing," he replied, "but I'm not rearranging my whole life because your kidneys don't work." "My kidneys don't work," I repeated, stunned. "You know what I mean," he said, impatient. "I have my job, my friends, my routine. I can't be expected to drop everything." "I never said drop everything," I replied. "But doctor's appointments, dialysis, that's not optional." "That's a full-time job," he said, "on top of my actual full-time job." "Other couples manage," I said quietly. "Other people aren't me." That was it. There was nothing else to argue with, no misunderstanding to clear up. He wasn't confused. He wasn't scared. He was drawing a line and making it clear which side I was on. So I stopped talking. I gathered the papers, carried them upstairs to the office, and began researching how to manage chronic kidney disease alone. Support systems, transportation options, financial assistance, emergency planning. That night, he ordered takeout for himself. Didn't ask if I wanted anything. Didn't check if it fit my new dietary restrictions. He ate in front of the TV and went to bed early. I sat upstairs, staring at my computer screen, and realized something with unsettling clarity. This wasn't going to get better, because he wasn't going to change. And the moment I stopped asking him to care was the moment my marriage quietly ended, long before either of us said the word divorce. After that conversation in the kitchen, something shifted inside me, not explosively, not dramatically, but decisively. I stopped asking. I stopped mentioning when the medication made me nauseous, or when the headache settled behind my eyes like a constant hum. I stopped reminding him about appointments. I stopped expecting him to notice when I came home exhausted, my body heavy in a way sleep didn't fix. Instead, I adapted. I set alarms on my phone for every pill. I color-coded my calendar with lab work, follow-ups, imaging. I spent my lunch breaks on hold with the insurance company, learning a new language made of deductibles and prior authorizations. I joined online forums late at night, reading posts from people who had been living with this for years, taking notes on how to manage alone. He didn't notice the change. If anything, he seemed relieved. The house was quieter. I wasn't asking for rides. I wasn't interrupting his evenings with health talk. He sat on the couch with a glass of wine, watching his shows, while I lay upstairs scrolling through medical articles, learning how to survive in a body that was failing me. A few weeks later, the side effects hit harder. I'd come home from work and collapse on the bed, my muscles shaking, my stomach rolling. Some nights, I didn't have the energy to cook. He'd order food for himself, eat in front of the TV, and head to bed without asking if I wanted anything, or if the food fit my new restrictions. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I could handle it. What I didn't realize was how much I'd already been handling long before the diagnosis. One evening, as I was paying bills at the kitchen table, it hit me. Every account was in my name. The mortgage, utilities, car insurance, property taxes, automatic payments set up years ago so nothing would ever fall behind. He contributed sometimes, groceries here, a shared expense there, but the infrastructure of our life had always been mine. I'd been the one carrying the invisible weight. 2 weeks after the diagnosis, I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer, not because I'd decided to leave, but because I needed to understand my options. I needed to know what my life would look like if I had to do this alone. The lawyer was direct. "The house is in your name," he said, flipping through documents. "You bought it before the marriage. The mortgage is yours. Your retirement accounts are separate. You never combined finances." "So this would be clean?" I asked. "As divorces go," he said gently, "yes, cleaner than most." I stared at the desk between us. I'm not sure I want a divorce, I said. He nodded. But you're thinking about what happens if your partner won't act like one. I was. He advised me to document everything: medical expenses, conversations, moments where support was refused. If it comes to divorce, he said, this pattern matters. I left his office with a folder of information and a sick feeling in my stomach. Not from fear, but from grief. This wasn't how I'd imagined my marriage ending. Not over sickness. Not over the one moment vows are supposed to mean something. A month later, my body forced the issue. I collapsed at work. A coworker found me on the bathroom floor and called an ambulance. I spent 6 hours in the ER being stabilized, IVs in my arm, doctors asking questions I barely had the energy to answer. They called my emergency contact, my husband. He didn't come. When I finally got home that night in a rideshare, because he hadn't answered my calls, I found him on the couch watching TV. You okay? He asked, eyes still on the screen. I collapsed at work, I said. I was in the ER. Oh, he replied, that sucks. They called you. Yeah, he said. I saw. I was in a meeting. Couldn't leave. I went upstairs, took my medication, sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. Something crystallized then, sharp and undeniable. This wasn't going to get better. He wasn't going to show up. And once I accepted that, I stopped hoping and started preparing. After the night I came home from the ER and found my husband still on the couch, something inside me went cold and clear. Not angry, not hysterical, focused. I stopped thinking in terms of us and started thinking in terms of survival. The first thing I did was change my emergency contact. I sat at my desk the next morning, logged into the hospital portal, and replaced my husband's name with my brother's. He lived 2 hours away, but I knew, without question, that if his phone rang, he would show up. No excuses, no delays, no resentment. The second thing I did was separate my finances. I wasn't hiding money. I wasn't doing anything illegal. I simply redirected my paycheck into a new checking account my husband didn't have access to. I continued paying the mortgage and utilities from the old account, but my savings, the buffer I might need if my health declined, went somewhere safe. He never noticed. That realization hurt more than I expected. Then I updated my will and medical directives. I removed my husband entirely. My brother became my medical power of attorney, my executor, the person legally allowed to make decisions if I couldn't. Signing those documents felt heavier than signing any financial paperwork. It was the moment I admitted, fully, that I could not trust my husband with my life. I began documenting everything. Dates, times, what I asked for, what he said in response. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. My lawyer had been clear. Patterns matter. And the pattern was unmistakable. Disengagement, refusal, indifference. 6 weeks after the diagnosis, I finally told my brother everything over dinner. You're leaving him, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Eventually, I replied, I just need to make sure I'm stable enough to do it. He's going to be blindsided. I shook my head. He's been blind this whole time. I'm just making it official. 2 months after the diagnosis, I found an apartment. A small one-bedroom on the ground floor near a major bus line. Close to the hospital where I'd soon start dialysis. Easy to maintain. Easy to leave if I needed to. I paid the deposit from my separate account and scheduled the move for the end of the month. I still hadn't told my husband. I thought I was waiting for the right moment. The moment found me instead. I came home one afternoon from an early dialysis session, exhausted, lightheaded, barely able to stand, and found him packing a suitcase. What's going on? I asked. I'm going on a spa weekend with the girls, he said casually. I told you about it. I have my first full dialysis session this weekend, I replied. I told you weeks ago. He zipped the suitcase. That's your thing. You don't need me there. I might, I said. The doctor said the first sessions can be rough. Call your brother, he said. He's 2 hours away, or call a friend. I'm asking my husband, I said quietly. And your husband is telling you he has plans, he replied. I booked this months ago. I'm not canceling because you're sick. Because I'm sick, I repeated. You know what I mean, he said impatiently. I can't put my life on hold indefinitely. I felt something inside me settle into place. You should go, I said calmly. Really, you're right. You should live your life. He looked relieved. Thank you. I'll be back Sunday night. Take your time, I said. He left an hour later, and that was when I started packing. It took me 4 hours to gather everything that mattered. Clothes, documents, photos from before the marriage, a few pieces of furniture that were mine. My brother arrived with a truck, no questions asked. Before I left, I placed the bills on the kitchen counter. All of them. with a note explaining that the automatic payments had been turned off, that the mortgage, utilities, and insurance were now his responsibility if he wanted to stay in the house. I also left the divorce papers. I'd signed them that afternoon. I didn't cry when I walked out. I felt finished. The first night in my new apartment was quiet in a way I wasn't prepared for. No TV murmuring in the background, no clinking of dishes, no footsteps moving from room to room. Just me, Bailey curled up beside the couch, and the steady awareness that I had finally crossed a line I couldn't uncross. That night, my phone lit up over and over again. 47 missed calls, more than 100 messages. Most were from my husband. "Where are you? What is going on? You can't just disappear. This is insane." I didn't respond. By Sunday night, the messages turned desperate. "All your stuff is gone. The bills are on the counter. Why would you do this to me?" I finally texted back one sentence. "I've moved out. The papers explain everything. Please contact my lawyer." He called immediately. I answered this time. "You can't just stop paying the mortgage," he said, panic leaking into his voice. "The house will go into foreclosure." "Then pay it," I replied. "It's in your name now if you want to keep it. I can't afford it on my own." "That sounds like a you problem," I said calmly. "This is cruel," he snapped. "You're being vindictive." "I'm being done," I replied. "There's a difference." He started crying then, really crying. "Please," he said, "can we just talk about this?" "No," I said. "You had 2 months to talk, 2 months to show up, 2 months to act like my husband." I hung up and blocked his number. A week later, a letter arrived. My brother had already set up mail forwarding, so it came directly to my new address. It was from the insurance company. Approval for transplant evaluation. Next steps. Testing timelines. Caregiver requirements. My husband's name wasn't listed anywhere. I'd already removed him. Seeing it in writing made my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with my kidneys. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. This was about survival. And I'd chosen people who would actually stand beside me. 2 weeks after I moved out, my husband showed up at my apartment. I don't know how he found the address. When I opened the door, he looked wrecked, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, wearing the same hoodie he'd had on the day he left for the spa. "Can we talk?" he asked. "No," I said. "5 minutes," he begged. "Please." "I made a mistake," he said as soon as I stepped back. "I was scared. I didn't know how to handle your diagnosis." "So you didn't handle it at all," I replied. "I should have been better." "Yes," I said, "you should have. I can change." "You already showed me who you are when things got hard," I said, "and I don't want to be married to that person." He cried harder then. "Why are you being so cold?" "I'm not," I said. "I'm protecting myself, because you didn't." I closed the door. 2 days later, the signed divorce papers arrived in an envelope. I didn't read the note inside. I handed the papers to my lawyer and felt something inside me release, slowly, painfully, but completely. That was the darkest moment, not because I was alone, but because I finally understood I always had been. And once I accepted that truth, the fear lost its grip. The turning point didn't come with a grand speech or a sudden burst of strength. It came quietly, the morning after I handed the signed divorce papers to my lawyer, when I woke up in my new apartment and realized something simple but profound. I was still here. My body was tired. My kidneys were still failing. My life had been uprooted in ways I never planned for, but I was breathing. Bailey was asleep at my feet, and for the first time in months, there was no one in the next room resenting me for being sick. That absence felt like relief. A few days later, my brother drove down early in the morning to take me to another round of testing. We sat in the waiting room together, plastic chairs, bad coffee, the smell of disinfectant in the air. He didn't complain. He didn't check his phone every 2 minutes. He just sat there, asked how I was feeling, and stayed. When the nurse called my name, he stood up with me. "I've got you," he said, like it was obvious. And that was the moment I realized how low the bar in my marriage had been. The transplant evaluation process moved faster than I expected. More blood work, imaging, consultations, conversations about timelines and donor matching. At one appointment, a coordinator asked, "Who will be your primary caregiver during recovery?" I didn't hesitate. "My brother," I said. She smiled and nodded, checking the box. No questions, no surprise. A week later, the call came. There was a potential match. Not immediate surgery, not a guarantee, but a real path forward. A future that didn't end in endless dialysis. My brother didn't even pause when I told him. "We'll make it work," he said. "Whatever it takes." That's when it hit me. The marriage hadn't failed because I got sick. It failed because the person who promised to stand beside me chose comfort over commitment. And in walking away from that, I hadn't lost my support system. I'd finally uncovered the one that was always there. Friends started showing up in ways I hadn't expected, dropping off meals that fit my diet, driving me to appointments when my brother couldn't, texting just to ask how I was feeling without making it awkward. At work, my manager quietly adjusted my schedule. Coworkers donated sick days. No one made me feel like a burden. People cared. I wasn't asking anymore. I wasn't begging. I wasn't shrinking myself to be palatable. I was accepting help from people who offered it freely. One night, as I lay on the couch with Bailey pressed against my side, it became clear. The darkest part of my life hadn't been the diagnosis. It had been trying to survive it next to someone who resented me for needing anything at all. And once that person was gone, space opened up. For healing, for support, for a future that wasn't built on guilt. I didn't feel strong yet, but I felt steady. And for the first time since February, that felt like enough. The consequences didn't arrive with drama or shouting. They arrived the way reality usually does. Slow, unavoidable, and indifferent to excuses. Within a week of me moving out, my ex-husband began calling people he'd never bothered to call before. My parents, our mutual friends, even my brother. Everyone heard a different version of the story. To some, I was overreacting. To others, I was pushing him away when he was trying to cope. A few people were told I had made decisions without including him. What stayed consistent was this: no one rushed to rescue him. Because once people heard the full picture, the diagnosis, the ER visit, the spa weekend, the sentence, "I'm not your caregiver," the room always went quiet. The house became his problem almost immediately. He called me twice about the mortgage before I blocked his number. He didn't understand how much it cost to maintain the life he'd been coasting through. He'd never handled the utilities, the insurance, the property taxes. He hadn't realized how much of our stability had been invisible labor I carried without complaint. Refinancing required a co-signer. His parents stepped in reluctantly. Even then, it wasn't enough. 3 months later, I heard through a mutual friend that he'd put the house on the market. It sold for less than we'd hoped. The timing was wrong. The market had shifted. He lost money trying to keep a lifestyle he couldn't afford alone. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt unsurprised. He tried to reach me once more through email, long paragraphs about regret, fear, how he never imagined it would turn out like this. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to negotiate. He had chosen his life. I had chosen mine. The last thing I heard was that he'd moved back in with his parents temporarily, that the spa trips had stopped, that the routines he'd guarded so fiercely had collapsed without someone quietly managing them in the background. Meanwhile, my life looked different, but it was honest. Dialysis became routine. Not easy, but manageable. My brother adjusted his work schedule to help during recovery days. Friends rotated meals without me having to ask. When I was tired, no one sighed. When I needed help, no one treated it like an inconvenience. The fallout wasn't about punishment. It was about exposure. My ex-husband hadn't lost me because I got sick. He lost me because when the cost of love rose, he decided it was too expensive. And once that truth was visible, it followed him everywhere. I didn't need revenge. The truth did the work for me. 6 months after my diagnosis, my life no longer looked anything like the one I thought I was building. And yet it felt more real than it ever had. Dialysis became part of my routine. 3 times a week. Early mornings, long afternoons, needles, machines, quiet rooms filled with people who understood exhaustion in a way you can't explain to someone who's never felt it. It wasn't easy, but it was survivable. And more importantly, I wasn't doing it alone anymore. My brother showed up. Every time, no resentment, no scorekeeping. He sat beside me during sessions, joked when he could tell I was scared, learned my medication schedule better than I did. Friends coordinated rides, meals, check-ins. Coworkers adjusted expectations without making me feel weak. No one told me I was an inconvenience. A few weeks later, the call came. They'd found a match. Not immediately, not overnight, but a real, viable path forward. My brother didn't hesitate for even a second when the doctor explained what donation would involve. "If I can do this," he said, "then obviously I will." That was the moment I finally let myself grieve. Not the marriage, but the version of love I'd settled for. Because love isn't just words, it's presence. It's inconvenience. It's showing up when things are hard and staying even when it costs you something. I didn't lose a husband because I got sick. I lost him because he wasn't willing to love me when loving me required effort. The surgery went well. Recovery was slow, painful, humbling. I needed help with everything at first: walking, cooking, basic tasks I'd taken for granted my entire life. And not once did anyone make me feel guilty for needing it. That contrast changed me forever. I'm 39 years old now. I have one functioning kidney, my brother's, and a life built on foundations that don't crumble the moment things get uncomfortable. I live in a small apartment I can afford. I work fewer hours. I rest when my body tells me to. I no longer apologize for taking up space. I haven't rushed into another relationship. I'm not afraid of being alone anymore, because I learned something critical through all of this. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. I was abandoned while married. I was supported after I left. If there's one thing I wish I'd understood sooner, it's this. Anyone can love you when you're healthy, successful, and easy. But the people who stay when you're vulnerable, that's your real family. When my husband said, "I'm not your caregiver," he thought he was protecting his freedom. What he actually did was free me. And choosing to live, really live, honestly, without begging for care, was the bravest decision I've ever made.